Hey guys, how's it going? Valk here. So as the season's just ended, I hope you guys all reached the goals you wanted to reach, and this for myself marks the second time I managed to claw my way into a legend finish while fighting for my life. So with that, I wanted to share with you guys some of my experiences and thoughts I gathered for the end of the season. To that end, I used a few players' data to compile a tier list of units specifically for our RTA PvP. This includes data for about 5 players ranging from Legend to Emperor and will only include units that we used or were used against us. If there's a unit you like and they didn't make the list, it doesn't really mean anything outside of 5 people playing, a few thousand games for Emperor and Legend ended up just not seeing them a single time. Could be coincidence, or it could just mean that they're a little bit more niche. I think up until lower champion, you could easily play anything you want and still be okay. But if you want to get more competitive, this is the list of units that I think are very, very competitive. That being said, I'll go into each tier as well as talk about a few standout units that really shine towards the end of the season where games are the most competitive. The general power level within one tier should rank, left to right, and for any additional references, the description will also include an imager album of units as well as in-depth explanation and drafting tips. If you want to see more stats for both PvE or PvP, you can find them posted in my Discord, link in description as well. So my pre-bans for this season are AOL, Angel of Light, and Bellion. Switched up sometimes to Lua towards the end of the season, mostly to target ban versus really fast players. AOL is a pretty big no-brainer for me since she can neutralize a lot of fun units in the game as well as support units. And Bellion, even though I'm not a full cleaver, I have a tendency to play with units that use a lot of Tagahel's Ancient Book, so I rely on her out of my games to enable fast-paced combos. That's kind of where I have the most fun with the game. So first up, we have the meta-defining tier. These units are individually so strong that your opponents need to adapt at least 2 picks to deal with them. So on top of that, they're generally so neutral, right? Neutral meaning harder to punish. They're really hard for your opponents to kind of figure out where your draft is going and how to adapt to you. And they're really only punished by other meta-defining heroes. So in order, they're Lua, Conqueror Lilius, Apocalypse Ravi, Mediator Coeric, Spectre Tenebria, Briar Witch Asaria, Faithless Lidica, as well as Savior Aiden. So the standout unit here is Lua, first and foremost. She's I think released this season, and when a really fast player takes her, especially with a book, you're kind of in a pinch unless you have a Fallen Cecilia that can protect your team's immunity. A Ravi, also a huge one. A lot of players wrote her off this season because she kind of fell off in terms of pick rate, but in reality, most players are just kind of tired of picking her because she's not a very fun or flashy hero to play, right? She's just strong, she swings, and when you need her to, she swings a big axe and then revives the unit, right? It is huge, absolutely huge for endgame scenarios where you can make a huge tempo swing and make a big comeback. And I think she contributed a lot to my legend climb this season. Briar Witch is up here mostly because she now counters 2 playstyles, Revive and Evasion, which makes her very essential to playing aggressive since those are 2 very important ways for slower players to defend against faster players. Faithless Lidica is another one since she's very hard to punish in Guiding Light and can reset a lot of key units like a Ravi, Mediator. With Soulburn, can even reset a Destina, can reset a bunch of slower units like Strays if you can get that matchup in, and then versus defensive players, you can reset their FCC as well. Just very, very flexible and can trigger units like Aiden. And Aiden herself is the last unit in the meta-defining tier since she's a very contested hero, especially in aggressive mirror matches. The player who triggers Aiden in those matches usually has a high likelihood of losing outright, if not just getting completely killed, because that S2 does a lot of damage. And, even if they don't die off the bat, Aiden can give her entire team invincibility, which stalls out a lot of those teams. Next up is the playstyle defining tier of heroes. These heroes generally fit in 2 to 3 different playstyles and are essential to the function of said playstyle. So for example, right, standard tank down and counter usually have a very hard time if they can't get Destina and ST Arrow, right? If you don't get these tanks and Destina, you feel like you're playing from the back foot. And, you know, another example is very hard to play aggro right now if you don't have a Strays, and this tier includes a lot of very tall heroes for their job. So in order, these heroes are Destina, SC Arrowell, Edward, Landy, DJ Bassar, Peyra, Ran, Solitaria, Sage Vivian, Strays, Politis, Shu, Kisei, Pirate Captain Flan, Sage Ball, Karina, Zio, Fallen Cecilia, Yulha, Crimson Armin, Rimuru, Sid, Wanderer Silk, and Green Vildred. So standout number 1 in this tier is one of the newest additions, Edward Elric. I think Ed is really important in protecting a lot of standard players from hard debuff comps like Solitaria, Death Dealer Ray, Pirate Captain Flan. Outside of him, there's not a lot of easy ways to deal with those units, since a lot of it goes towards having high effect resist on cleanse units, which is a huge gear check, and Ed bypasses gear checks, which to me makes him sit very comfortably in this spot. Another one, myself included, right? High F Pirate Captain Flans is a lot of people's way of dealing with very, very slow tank down players last day. Like, for example, once Destina's butterfly buff falls off, Pirate Captain Flan can just go crazy on a slower team, and she can just kind of kill a lot of slow teams by herself. Very, very high value unit. If you have Star of the Deep Sea, right, which is her best artifact, she can kill a lot of teams by herself. Very, very strong. Karina was another outstanding unit. Because she's, in fact, she's a surprise unit because a lot of aggro and cleave players just didn't expect her to be so strong. She turned out unexpectedly strong for a collab unit, especially when all the other units just kind of do their job fine. Karina's a straight up standout. She's very proficient at shutting down cleave and aggro because she can CR push herself, and her damage lets her one-shot a lot of low HP units, right? If your unit has less than like 10,000 HP, which cleave and aggro has a lot of, she's insanely good into them. Zio is also in this tier. I think he fell off a bit from release, because at release, I think he was high S tier, but he fell off a bit due to the power of guiding light units and being able to trap Zio if you first pick him. And then I think Karina also didn't do him any favors. She single-handedly punched him down to this tier. Most Karinas can one-shot a Zio. It's very strong. So in the middle of the tier list, we have strong role units. They're some of the best at doing their specific job, but usually will have like a distinct weakness if you pick them too early. So most of these units, I would say, fit that third and fourth pick mold in the draft the best. So these units are Maid Chloe, Amelia, Auxiliary Lots, Ning Ning, Little Queen Charlotte, Archdemon Shadow, Summertime Iceria, Designer Lilibet, Alencia, Leica, Researcher Carrot, Milim, Aria, Eaton, Troublemaker Crozet, Adventurer Ross, Zahak, Top Model Luluka, Operator Sigrid, Dark Corvus, Death Dealer Ray, Remnant Violet, Lionheart Sermia, Senya, Winter, Koeric, Kayron, Ida, Fairy Tale Tenebria, Holiday Euphine, and the speed imprints for this tier are Fire Shuri, Watcher Shuri, and Fire Surin. So the number 1 unit here I want to talk about in this tier is Leica. She fell down hard from S tier, especially in the last week of the season. Reason being, I think number 1, Immunity Set. Immunity Set completely diffuses her S3, and Immunity Set made a huge comeback, right? A lot of units came back on Immunity Set because of Leica. And the other problem is, between DJB, Rimuru, Politis, and Faithless Litica, all of these units counter her to some degree. So you literally just put all 4 of these units on Immunity Set, and in a draft, depending on what other units they have, right? In a favorable matchup, you pick 2 of them, and then immediately Leica is kind of like a net negative for your draft. And she fell really, really hard. You shouldn't, if you do what I say right here, you should basically be beating Leica like 95% of the time. Another strong comeback being made towards the end of the season is Archdemon and Alencia. These units fell off decently hard, and they took like a trip to like the lower tiers, and then made a comeback here because of Apocalypse Ravi. So as a Ravi gets stronger, so does her hard counters. Another standout is Milim. Milim was a standout pick for a lot of tank down players, since their build is usually really tanky, and especially next to like an SC Airwell, your Milim's not going to die to burst damage. Milim also innately discourages opponent from picking up Landy, right? Because she's a hard counter to Landy. So when your opponent inevitably picks all of these water units to counter her, Landy will be available in the later rotations of a draft for you. So she works really well naturally with a Landy. Operator Sigrid also took a bit of a dive there because after Hwayoung's big nerf, she became less mandatory. She's also higher risk to picking like a Ning Ning or a DJB, for example. So to that end, Operator Sigrid as the default barrier counter fell off just a little bit. And then two outstanding picks, Dark Corvus and Death Dealer Ray. Not as good as Pyro Captain Flam, but I think if you have a hard time playing against tank down players who are really hard to punish, right? They play really safe. They play, if their first three picks are support, tank, and you don't really know what to pick versus them. I think these two gentlemen do really, really well in that matchup, and they were the key for a lot of people to be able to beat those drafters towards last day. Rounding up the tier, we have strong niche units. So these guys are generally strong in their role, but either have someone who does their jobs better or are a little bit too punishable. Like the punishment is a little too strong if they come out earlier in a draft. So to that end, it's best for them to chill in the lower tier, and these heroes are best picked like 4th to 5th pick. So in order, they're Green Yufine, DN, Crow, Roana, Pavel, Wanda, Roy Mustang, Seaside Bologna, Rem, Mercedes, Fire Charlotte, Commander Pavel, Assassin Sid, Ruel, Shadow Knight Pillis, General Purgus, Mursa, Spirit Eye Celine, Specialty Change Jenna, Blue Flan, and BBK. So the only standouts in here that people might not expect are units like Roy and Commander Pavel. I think these units fell off particularly hard for no other reason because of Karina. Karina is just way too strong. I think Karina killed off a lot of these very, very aggressive drafts, hyper-aggressive drafts, in fact, with Roy and Commander Pavel, and just made it really hard to play them. Outside of those guys, I think these units are in general where you would expect them to be. And lastly, we have like the weaker niche picks. Personally, I think a lot more units could make the cut here, but as I said, right, we're only pulling from 5 players' logs from Emperor Plus. So there's a lot of room for imagination. So if they don't end up on the list, don't be too discouraged. Anything's playable. And these heroes, right, from what we've seen are Astromancer Elena, Green Celine, Assassin Coley, Haste, Closer Charles, Tempest Surin, ML Kawazu, Violet, Batcat Armin, Hwayoung, Arbiter Vildred, Summer Break Charlotte, Fire Ravi, and a Tywin. And that kind of rounds out our overall tier list, and this is just, what we've seen towards the last 2 weeks of the season, right? So very competitive games. And, with that, it's a lot of juicy info about Season 9 condensed into one video. Hopefully this gives you guys a good scope on how the game changes when going to the end of the season, especially since it always slows down and becomes all about expected value, right? Nobody wants to RNG loss a good chunk of their games. So I hope this information here gives you a good forecast on what to expect in the seasons going forth, especially when season's ending and ranking becomes very important. Again, if you need any additional resources, you can always find it in the description or in my Discord. And yeah, that's it from me for this video. Leave a like and a sub if you guys found it helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care and stay safe out there. See ya.